Welcome to City Week, ladies and gentlemen. Today I have the pleasure of sitting down with one of my high school classmates and also one of my good friends, Mr. Chalton Askew. Chalton, welcome to the show.
Good morning. How are you?
I am doing great. Chalton, I think our parents was so close that we almost share same names there, don't Chalton and Alton, correct?
So we have twin names here.
That's right.
Since I have a difficult name, I often use your name
Okay, well,
to help people pronounce mine.
Well, I will allow that. Sure. It's a great man to share that name with me. And Chalton, you and I go way back, but and known each other for a long time. And the community knows you as well. But introduce and just tell everybody a little bit about yourself, if you don't mind.
Certainly. So I grew up in the Canterville community, and it's a community where everybody is your mom and everybody is your dad. But we learned a lot from our community, and they always celebrated our accomplishments and helped push us forward. And I think we're the proof of their labor sitting here today. So I recently transitioned from 30 years at Interface as working as a cost accountant and accepted the executive director position with trust building to help lead the racial reconciliation initiative in Troup County.
Okay. And Chalton, from that, and also you now on another group that is spun off as a result of racial trust building, and something that I know is very near and dear to your heart, and something I should think is very near and dear to everybody here, and that is education. And you're part of the education task force. Talk a little bit about that for us.
Certainly. So we had people to go through trust building, and at that particular time, I guess there was an emphasis on underperforming schools, and for some, since we were a racial trust building group, there was attention given to racially identifiable schools. And so from that, people, I'm going to say, were empowered. They wanted to continue dialoguing on it. So we did a listening session for about 6 months with people that were interested in the state of education in our community. And from that, we approached the school board and asked for a task force, and they consented, and they have participated and worked right along with us each month dialoguing. And I think part of the reason why we wanted to come here today to promote education is the content of the dialogue is so rich. But we're almost preaching to the choir if we're the only ones hearing it. So we wanted to make sure we get the message promoted out into the community.
Okay, absolutely. And you know, like you say, you're preaching to the choir. When you're talking about education and educators, they are there for the long haul, for the purpose, for training those young minds to influence and to be citizens in our communities or whatever community they land in. And you talked about the racial identifiable schools. And when you talk about that, I'm sure that when you think about things, you saw the lack of resources in some areas as opposed to other areas, or help me understand that a little bit, if you don't mind.
So basically, you know, for our group, we wanted to make sure we had all stakeholders at the table, which comes to parents, grandparents, and we know that the family dynamics has shifted, and so grandparents are more involved now with their children. But from that, we wanted to take a look at, looks like African American males were the most underperforming. So the approach of the task force was, let's stop the bleeding. What can we do to help move the needle or draw some attention to? And as we dialogued more and more, we saw that there was work being done by the school system to support, you know, all learners and all children. However, with I'm going to say an overpopulation of people that needed extra learning opportunities, being in only 1 or 2 schools in the community or in our system was probably an overburden to the teachers and the staff at that school. So it's not an easy solution. You know, you could move kids around, that's part of it, more resources, but also what do you expose children to? You know, if you're only in schools with people that reach a certain status, then that's all you see. And that affects long-term outcomes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
You know, in talking about that, Chalton, I heard you mention about parents, grandparents, and the dynamics of the family structure has changed. And I know you said it today that you got to bring in awareness. How can those individuals that you mentioned get more involved with what you all are talking about and what is taking place in our community?
Yeah, so certainly we've all just had to rebound from the COVID impact, and it affected everyone in this community. I think if I was wanted to, the broadest spectrum is we're all in this together.
Okay.
We've all heard the adage, it takes a village to raise a child, but now I think there's more demand on that adage that it needs. Like, we need the village, we need our community, we need everyone being a part of the learning process. And as much as we as adults faced difficulty and different levels of stress during this pandemic, we also hear in our conversation how much children have been impacted, and grandparents becomes the nurturers, or they become surrogate parents, to their grandchildren, or they keep them the majority of the time while the parents are working. So we'd like for those grandparents also to just own that span of time and use it as teachable moments with those children, whether it's doing something as simple as reading to them, reading stories, holding conversations with them, understanding what they're concerned about, taking check of their emotions, and just making sure that children get their vision checked, their hearing checked, and they're helping parents. I think entire communities, I know the community I grew up in, we function as a community. Right. If we did something, one group of parents took us and the other group of parents picked us up, to make sure we had opportunities.
That's right.
So I think there's a part that the entire community can play.
Okay. And I want to shift just a little bit there, talking about, because it's important that to get that foundation. I want to do a two-part question here and talking about words, vocabulary, job readiness. I want you to roll all that into one if you don't mind. How does that foundation help in all those aspects?
Yeah, so I think it's I just read this comment. It says children are 20% of our population, but they're 100% of our future. Yeah. And being, we're in the end of life phase for baby boomers, and also statistics or just the population now is the millennials are the largest living group. And so we're going to phase off the scene. And what these children are learning now, we want them to be prepared for real life when it happens. And what we do know is that everything is evolving, and the types of jobs that are going to be available when they're in work ready is going to be far different from the types of jobs we were able to take when we grew up. And so preparing them to step into those jobs is everything that they're learning now. Like it matters what they're learning now. And so we operated a tutoring group in Canterville for 10 years. And one of the things I made those children do was tell me what you want to be when you grow up. Because I wanted them to know that everything they're learning now is helping to bring options to their adult life. It's going to help you expand the choices you have. And yeah, one of the pet peeves for me is people like to baby talk to children, and I get it a little bit with parents, but it almost makes them have to unlearn when they start formal education. And so why not just go ahead and help them build word patterns, sentence patterns, structure, articulate. I read Malcolm Gladwell's book, Outliers, and one of the things he said was important for parents to teach is their children how to speak up for themselves. And I think sometimes that does a disservice for children in classroom that may not be getting it or may be bullied, because that's still prevalent in today's times. And if we teach them how to speak up for themselves, we empower them. And the sooner we empower them, I think it builds their confidence towards learning and just towards life.
Okay.
And I think it helps them to be more impressive when they go for interviews, whether it's for college interviews, we hope at the beginning, or if some just decide to go right into the workforce, we want them to be able to present their best self to a future employer and to show their talents and abilities.
And then, Chalton, I think from what I've heard in talking with you before we came on, all of that ties into lifting individuals out of poverty. Talk about that for us.
Absolutely. So we're a high poverty. We have a high poverty rate in our community. And I believe that we need to work on intervention and prevention at the same time. And I think we as a community have to own our portion of responsibility to let's interrupt that system. And so if we're not attracting higher paying jobs because we don't have a workforce that's available and ready, then we're going to sustain poverty because the only thing we can attract would be lower paying jobs, and it would not raise the poverty level. Yes, I would like to start seeing families climb out, and I think in my community we grew up, or Cannonville, we've done that. There was a certain economic profile that our parents were able to achieve, but education was promoted. It's not the only answer, but it's a good tool. It's a good vehicle to help position us, for different economic levels.
Absolutely. Chalton, take a few seconds. Awareness is what we're talking about here today, but involvement is more so what you guys need. Once again, just iterate, how can the community get involved?
So there are many ways that the community could get involved. You can take ownership of your neck of the woods or your community, like being a bus monitor, being just as you interact with children, see the need, meet the need if you can, or help point them to resources. There are volunteer opportunities within the system, and as you know, we had to come out with a hybrid model, which we're very thankful for Troup County Schools being flexible and adaptive to get children in the classroom, those that could attend and those that couldn't, to make a hybrid model available virtually. And what also it looks like across the state and probably the nation is the children that's in virtual are gonna be a little behind the children that's in class learning. And so we can help, I'm gonna say, shrink that gap and catch them up. And there are parents that are probably strained during this time trying to get to jobs, and especially if they have multiple children. So they might just need a little help. And if you can assist them in some way, and perhaps it might just be you take on reading a book to them, or holding a conversation with the children, or looking after the children, assist them with a meal, doing whatever you can to relieve pressures. And become aware, engaged. Yes.
Absolutely. Well, Chalton, I want to thank you for being my guest today, and definitely we know that the community, which is a very caring community, will come out and get involved with the Education Task Force. And I'm going to follow up your interview. I have Dr. George Henry, who is a co-facilitator of this as well, to have him come on. Again, I just want to thank you for being my guest today, and anything that I can do in TV, LGTV can do to help get the awareness out, definitely give us a call. All right?
Certainly. We appreciate the opportunity you have extended to us.
Thank you so much, Chalton. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned for more City Week in just a moment.